Show.
You're not out here. We could have done this in the back of Maddie's place. That would have been phenomenal.
You know what? I would do it again, except that I think it's so newsy, and I want it out for Monday.
Oh, yeah, no, I know.
Let's do that again. So really quick, folks, I'm skipping all the glamorous intros. You are experiencing the Tom Kelly Show, the podcast where a middle-aged comedian gets back to having fun. And is there anything more fun, folks, than talking politics? And my guest today is a guy who has been on the show before, and he has got at the beginnings of this podcast, and 3 years ago, he predicted Alvin Bragg. If you're a New York City person, you go, why aren't they convicting people? Why aren't they convicting people? This guy was on my No Name podcast 11 months before he got elected and put into office, and everything Tom Kenniff predicted came to being, to the point where the governor of New York was actually thinking of, what's the word for kicking you out of office when you're the governor? There's a fancy word. Yeah, kicking him out of office. That's the word. Yeah, no, but like using her power to kick him out of office. And I would say over and over again, no, this is the problem with democracy. Tom Kenniff predicted Alvin Bragg, the man who does not, sue repeat criminals and press charges. And he's very forgiving. And as a Catholic, I love that. But as a guy who's got to walk down the block, Anyway, Tom Kenniff predicted all of this. And then this guy, Alvin Bragg, and again, Tom Kenniff was the Manhattan District Attorney candidate as a Republican, and got a dismal amount of the votes. And that's important to say because Tom Kenniff was talking about everything you were complaining about in New York City. Anyway, but God bless Alvin Bragg. The man apparently might be a good lawyer because he convicted Donald Trump, a man I did not vote for, on charges that I could not believe he was convicted for. And I've been around some of the players in the case. And last night, Tom Kenniff posted a sentence, finally some good news for New York. And I thought, holy cow, Kenniff would have sued Trump. And last night was the night that Trump got convicted. I'm like, oh my God, Kenniff has thoughts on the Trump case. And it turns out the status was about the New York Rangers. And despite all that, he's on the podcast now. What do you want to talk about, Tom? Rangers or Alvin Bragg and Donald Trump?
Well, now you've outed me to your Manhattan audience as a diehard anti-New York Ranger persona.
You're an anti-Ranger fan. Okay.
I'm an anti-Ranger. Like, I was born and raised a New York Islanders fan. And, someone asked me, well, look, the Islanders have been out and, does that mean that you'll at least support the Rangers? And I said, look, the reality is ISIS could have an ice hockey team and they could be playing the New York Rangers and I'd be rooting for ISIS. And I've served and fought in the Middle East. But, all right.
I feel like you have
I haven't evolved yet to that point.
Oh my God. So we've outed you. Maybe that's also what happened with the election against Bragg. Bragg just liked the Rangers a little more than you. I guess here's the first question, and this isn't a political podcast, and Tom and I grew up in the same neighborhood. Tom worked for my father. I have no journalistic credibility. I love this man. I think you're an Army hero. You are a neighborhood hero, and I'd like to see him win elected office one day. So I have no journalistic credibility, but I'm going to ask you bluntly. Had hell frozen over and you been elected Manhattan District Attorney, there were some legitimate questions about Trump. Would you have investigated a case and then would you have brought it to trial?
Well, I would have inherited an ongoing investigation at that point, right? And what I said on the campaign is that, look, I'm going to, if you're elected Manhattan District Attorney, you inherit tens of thousands of investigations or open cases or ongoing cases. You're not just going to, shut the door on any one of them for political reasons. I mean, I have, I support President Trump. I'm not going out to rallies and running around with MAGA hats on or anything like that. I'm a Republican, and I've had differences with President Trump. I've had differences with all our elected leaders, but I would have tried to, as impartially as anybody can, look at the investigation and see what it was. That was what I said during the campaign.
Okay.
People would come up on the street and said, well, you're going to prosecute Trump, right? And these were fervent anti-Trumpers. And there's plenty of them in Manhattan, particularly I think it was maybe less now, but in 2001, there were plenty. And my response will be, we'll prosecute him for what? And you'd get this sort of dead. January 6th. Okay. Well, this is a local district attorney's race. We don't have any jurisdiction to prosecute someone over, what did or didn't happen at the Capitol. But knowing what I know now, do I think that this case should have been brought, even if you believe that Trump did everything the jury apparently found that he did exactly the way the Manhattan DA's office said he did it? No, because I think that, no one is above the law, but there is prosecutorial discretion. If you're going to make the unprecedented move of bringing the first criminal trial against a former president, it has to be of something of much more serious import than this.
Okay. I like that. Now, had you inherited it that far down the line, actually, here's a question. Is there a chance you would get elected mid-trial? Does that ever happen, or right before a trial is about to be brought? You would have used your prosecutorial discretion, big words for a comedian here, and you would have said, all right, this isn't enough to charge a president with. That just dumbing it down for people, right?
Based on what I know about this case, yes, absolutely. Okay. I mean, my answer during the campaign was, I'll follow the evidence. I didn't know at that point, people had ideas of what Trump was being investigated for, but for all I knew, maybe they were, investigating him for, 3 gangland murders that he, participated in, conspired when he was trying to get contracts in the 70s and 80s when the mob was running the city, right? But yeah, if this was the case, I wouldn't have brought it. And remember, when Bragg first inherited this, it was a very different case. And this is when, that miserable, in my opinion, very unethical individual. Him too. But he had this guy Pomerantz who wrote the book. After he unceremoniously parted ways with Bragg because Bragg wasn't willing to bring that case, which was, the idea that you're going to go after him for inflating the value of his real estate to get, mortgage loans, the criminal version of what Tish James did. And Bragg said, no, that wasn't going to happen. This guy Pomerantz, who'd signed on with the office, just with the intent of prosecuting Trump for something. It doesn't even seem that he knew what it was. And I haven't read his book, nor will I ever, but I've read enough articles about it. And, it's basically sounds like a treatise on, I could find something to prosecute Trump on. Well, that, the idea that you're going to be elected a prosecutor, appointed a prosecutor, take a prosecutorial role, and then you're going to find the person and then find the crime, it turns prosecutorial ethics upside down. It's not supposed to work that way. You're not supposed to pick an individual and say, what can I prosecute them for? You're supposed to, get evidence that comes your way through whatever sources. And if it's evidence of a crime and it points in someone's direction, then you bring a case.
All right. Now, you followed this case, right?
Yeah, I did and I didn't. To be honest with you, the case was unavoidable, right? So much press coverage, and I know a lot of the players involved on the defense and the prosecution side. So I followed it tangentially, but I was actually on trial in my own case where my client was facing up to 25 years in that building, for essentially the whole month of May. We just got a verdict last week. So I had my own things going on. But look, you can't help but be that close to something like this and not pay a bit of attention.
Okay, so I'll ask you dumb comedian questions here real quick. If you had a case against anybody and the lead witness was a tabloid owner, the second lead witness was a working porn star, which we're not going to porn shame here at the Tom Kelly Show, and the third lead witness was a lawyer who took a deal, I feel like if you were a defense lawyer, that had to be easier to defend. I don't know. I just again, I did not vote for Trump. I would not have convicted in this case. Is that crazy? Is it fair?
Well, when I think of David Pecker, all I could think of is that line from Ghostbusters where, my name is Peck. I'm going to get you a nice fruit basket, when they want to shut down the ghost container. Anyway, that's for a Ghostbusters fan.
And now you're back to being
no relevance to your youthful audience, but they pejoratively call the guy Pecker, and his last name is Peck. That's what I'm getting at for everyone who knows.
No, and this guy is Pecker, and he owns a sleazy.
Yeah, I mean,
that's a perfect.
The names you can't make up. It always seems like whenever you have one of these big cases, someone just has a bizarre name that it's almost like scripted. But in any event, look, one of the reasons why prosecutors like this type of case, and one of the reasons why prosecutors have a tremendous advantage in this type of case, regardless of who their defendant is, it's one of the reasons why white collar crimes are so hard to defend, as opposed to street crimes where you may have problems with eyewitness testimony, and you may have reliability issues, or did you really see them run out of the bank and get a getaway car? Was the getaway car Pontiac, or was it an Oldsmobile? My cousin Vinny type stuff.
Yeah.
Go keep with the 80s genre. White collar cases are fertile ground for certainly for federal prosecutors, and also for the DA's office. They do a lot of white collar stuff. Because they tend to be paper cases, right? And what people don't realize is, one of the reasons why the government, offers subsidized interest rates and Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and insures your money in a bank up to $250,000, regardless of how reckless you are with your passwords and so forth, is because there is nothing that has greater transparency than our financial system. And the government, they don't even need a search warrant. They can do it through a grand jury subpoena, which is just a piece of paper. They can look at financial transactions, say 7 years, they go back really as far as they want, and everything. If you use an ATM, you do that. Everything is documented. They do these PowerPoints, and it's just laid out perfectly. So, with respect to the cast of characters in this trial, as colorful as they were, and you see this, again, often in federal cases, but in state cases, where you have these confidential informants that are just absolute dreads of humanity. I mean, forget Cohen, forget Pecker. I mean, I've tried cases in the Southern and Eastern District where the government's chief witness is a homicidal maniac, has been in and out of prison their whole life. But, in this case, they're able to take the paper and use these people to add context and color to it, which might not be enough in a case like this if your defendant is anyone but Donald Trump. But now you have Donald Trump in a jurisdiction that's 90% Democrat. And, here we are.
But dumbing it down potentially, and I know you were not a lawyer on the case, blah, blah, blah. There's a guy who was down the hall and is willing to take my phone calls. We agree that maybe the paper was the star and these people just added color to the paper.
Yeah, no, the paper is the star because, look, you have the invoices, you have there are questions, right? In other words, if my lawyer is paying, $130,000 to settle it, and his fees on there too, and I just enter it all as legal expense, some people might look at that and say, yeah, okay, well, maybe not the legal expense that goes to Razor and Kenniff to pay my hourly wage, or my hourly rate, which then makes an hourly wage. But also in there is the money that the lawyers are paying out. So there is some gray, right? But that's backfilled then with people like Cohen and people like Stormy Daniels and all that, and to the extent that they are damaged goods, and they are, the missing the secret ingredient is now you bring this case right in the jurisdiction that is most hostile to Donald Trump than anywhere else in the country, possibly the world, maybe with the exception of the District of Columbia.
Now, you were touching on this before. I think we saw this with Letitia James and Cuomo, and now with Trump. I think we saw this with Alvin Bragg and Trump for sure. And I'm blacking on the name of the woman who's handling the election fraud case in Georgia, who has been going through stuff.
Fannie Willis.
Yes, Fannie Willis. Are we in a spot where, it's one thing to say I'm running for office as a district attorney and I'm bringing down white collar crime, or I'm going to bring down street crime or whatever. Is it scary for America that we have?
Yep. Yeah, no, listen, no one needs to shed any tears for Donald Trump. Okay. Donald Trump will always land on his feet. He's proven that. And he's in a perverse way. I think he's enjoying all this and also parlaying it into like only he can, right? Like him and P.T. Barnum. So, Donald Trump is going to be fine no matter what happens here. But what makes this so disturbing, I think, and this is not because I'm some fervent Trump supporter or some fervent Republican. It is this case, in my opinion, has permanently damaged the American presidency for generations to come. Politics is an incredibly petty, vindictive, ego-driven business on left side of the aisle, right side of the aisle, middle, Green Party, Libertarian. I don't care who, what, when, where. That is politics, and there will be retribution extracted here. Right now, somewhere there is a Republican governor a Democratic governor in an otherwise red-leaning state. I don't know where, but there'll be one. Filling out a mortgage application with his wife right now, and putting down that $60,000 loan from his father-in-law as a gift to get the down payment, and give it time. I don't know if it'll be in 4 years, 8 years. That will be unearthed, and you're going to find some hardcore red state local yokel DA that is going to say, hey, now it's my turn. And this is going to go on and on. It'd be a terrible thing at any time, but when the world globally is facing arguably the most perilous times since, I would say, the early 1960s, it is a really, really unfortunate chain of events.
I mean, are we already seeing that with some of the Hunter Biden hubbub?
Well, it's certainly, it's not gonna, it's not gonna lessen the appetite of those on the right, or who want to see Hunter Biden prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. I was in law school during Monica Lewinsky, right? And what you heard during Monica Lewinsky was, we don't, overturn the will of the American people based on nefarious activities surrounding a sexual liaison with an intern. We certainly don't criminally prosecute a president for that kind of thing, even if they may have lied under oath or obstructed justice to cover up the affair. There's just no question that that's what Bill Clinton did. That was the refrain echoed on CNN. I mean, even moderate Republicans, I think Peter King, rallied around the Clintons, but was against going full tilt on that, impeaching the president, convicting. I mean, that's how one of the ways that Bill Clinton was able to survive, and they were right. They were right. Cooler heads prevailed. There were a lot of Republicans, and at that time I was, in my young 20s, and I probably was out there saying, he should pay a price for this. No one's above the law. But, we realized that, no one is above the law, but we do, have to protect the integrity of our public offices, particularly when we're talking about the leader of the free world. This is the case that, it's not that they couldn't have brought it. They obviously could. It's not that they could have succeeded in bringing it. They did. It's a win for Alvin Bragg in his office, although I don't think it's the kind of win that they thought it would be. It's been sort of, very kind of ho-hum response, I think, on every side of the aisle to this. And, it's a win for anybody who needed in their life to see Trump convicted of a felony. They got that. And congratulations to those folks. I'm sure they'll use it to their advantage or comfort. But it's not a win for the country.
Okay, now wins for the country. We're closing in on me letting you go back to work. I have.
My long answers aren't helping in that.
No. But also that's also how politicians get away from what might be the tougher question. I can't find how the case ended, but you took a controversial case last year with Daniel Penney, and tell me about. Yes. And I'm not going to. It's still ongoing. And
October is the trial. Yeah.
Okay, I don't want to put you on the spot for anything about the trial, but could you give me the one sentence on the trial, and then I have a personal question for you about why you'd take the case. What a challenge is the case?
I have a hard time doing one sentence on anything.
Yeah, I've noticed that.
One sentence would be, conscientious New Yorker comes to the aid of his fellow passengers and is, punished unfairly for it.
Yeah, so he saw a woman getting harassed by a homeless guy on the train, and
well, it was more than that. I mean, and this will crystallize at trial, but a lot of it's come out already. I mean, we in reviewing the grand jury minutes of that case, remember, defense attorneys aren't in the grand jury. There were about a dozen people who testified of all races, ethnicities, genders, walks of life. That they were terrified and quite sure that someone, either themselves or someone else, was going to die that day.
And as a New Yorker who's had that experience over and over again, I really am sad he got charged. That said, the case is controversial to some people. For you as a lawyer, a politician, there has to be trepidation when you take something so public.
Well, look, I am a lawyer who ran for office once.
Okay,
yeah. I did it. It wasn't based on, hey, I see politics as my future. I've always made the point, I'll make it again, that, I have a pretty nice life as a criminal defense attorney, and, running for office had all sorts of downsides for me, but I felt very strongly about how ill-advised the progressive criminal justice agenda was, and there was no response to it. So I decided, well, I got to be no counter to it, because no one seemed to be wanting to challenge the Democrats in Manhattan, but for obvious reasons, when you see how many votes I got, so I stepped up and did that. But look, I mean, the reality is that this was an easy one for me, right? Because as a criminal defense, I'm a law and order guy, but I believe in prosecutors prosecuting, right?
Okay.
Fairly, ethically, but when appropriate, aggressively, and criminal defense attorneys zealously defending their clients. No matter what they're accused of, no matter what kind of people they are. I mean, that is an adversarial system. That's the only way it functions. And those criminal defense attorneys like me, even if you're a law and order guy, you need checks and balances. Where the checks and balances on an over aggressive government or overzealous prosecution or corrupt police officers. As much as I love police officers, there are always the bad apples out there, right? So, this one was easy because my client's a great guy. He's the kind of guy you want to throw your arm around. He's the kind of guy that the overwhelming majority of public opinion is behind. If you see what he's raised online, fundraising, and so forth. It's not always that way. I've represented, probably right now, representing some really unsavory folks, right? No apologies. I always say, when people say, hey, how do you represent that people? How do you represent those people? It's the same way the doctor works on whoever comes into the triage unit in the emergency room. You might have Mother Teresa on the table, or you might have, Jeffrey Dahmer. You do your job, and the lawyer's job is to protect the constitutional rights of your client. So this one I feel good about. Myself, Steve Razor, tremendously optimistic that the Manhattan jury will do the right thing in this case.
Last two questions. I would vote for you for something. And I mean this, and then I have a couple of other friends who are, no, this is crazy, but you strike me as a right of center Republican, but reasonable, smart. You talk in complete sentences. You've been on Fox News. You're easy on the eyes. You should be doing something. And I have a few.
Tell my wife all this, please.
Yeah, please get her on the. By the way, ruin that all by drinking your gas station coffee all in one swim. Great. Brought to you by the Mineola Quickie Mart. Now,
brutal. Yeah. In my Manhattan office, I have good coffee.
I have friends who are slightly left of center, who are good people, reasonable, talking complete sentences, easy on the eyes. They've been on their MSNBCs and CNNs. I'd vote for them. The people I hear about now who are getting press are the crazy ass politicians. So I guess my question for you is, after having run for office, after being a big shot lawyer, getting all these high end cases, especially since we spoke last, question one is, how do reasonable people get press? And question two is, what is Kenniff running for next?
Well, how reasonable people, it's tough. I mean, look, the social media, I think, is the root of it. Before that, it was probably the 24/7 cable news media, so everything builds on everything else. But yeah, it's a hard world to be anything even resembling a moderate. And one of the things I always say is, look, I don't like everything Donald Trump does. I don't love the presentation always. It's sometimes very humorous to some, but yeah, I mean, I'd like to go back to the time of statesmen and Reagan and those types, Moynahans of the world. But that's not where we're at. And I always tell people, look, Donald Trump, love him or hate him, Donald Trump needs the radical left, as much as I guess they need to hate him, because they constantly pump wind in his sails. And I think this is a good example. I think there are a lot of people that, do I think that Donald Trump committed crimes on January 6th? No, I don't personally. But, there are a lot of people that said, hey, look, this is, I've had enough. But I think a lot of those people have come back into the vortex because the other side just went so disproportionate against them that you're like, look, I gotta counter that, so I'm gonna support him. But yeah, I don't know what the answer to that is. I mean, what I can say is, and this is probably a little trite, is what I learned from running for office. The first lesson I learned is you can't do anything without money. I don't care how charismatic you are. I don't care. I mean, forget. Thanks for calling me easy on the eyes, but I mean, you could have Brad Pitt, Tom Cruise, the best looking guy in the world, not me, most eloquent, most well-spoken, most charismatic. You're not getting to first base without dollars. And, those dollars generally come from, I think, at least initially from the far side of the base, right? Whether you're on the left or the right. So if you're not out there throwing that red meat to the hardcore MAGA crowd, if you're on that side, or the extreme leftist burn down the college campus crowd on the other side, and everybody gets to use whatever bathroom they're feeling on that particular day. It's tough. I mean, I tend to be a glass half full guy. So
yeah, I keep using the Stephen Colbert quote of "There's no such thing as the passionate middle," and it scares me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, big question, and then you can go back to your cheap ass coffee and your big ass law firm. You're handling some high profile cases right now. Would you ever run for office again?
I never like to say never in life. We'll see what the future will bring. I mean, what I could say is it's not something I'm angling for. It's not something that, I'm not, my life is not going to be complete until I achieve public office. It wasn't like that when I ran the first time. But we'll see. I always tell my wife, I'm like, look, I do have some friends in, high places, depending on the elections. I never planned it that way. It was just, a lot of people don't know. I actually commissioned into the military with Joe Biden's late son, Bo. We were classmates.
Did you know Bo?
I did, yeah. I mean, we were in a class of 60-something people, along with Lee Zeldin was in that class as well. Lee tells the story a lot. And my law partner, Stephen Razor. And, that's just one anecdote. But, I tell my wife, like, look, if I want to get into public service, I want one of these people that, I've been fortunate enough to just come into their stratosphere in life, not by jockeying or planning, to like appoint me to be ambassador of some, like Monaco or something like that. I want to be sitting at a cafe in a linen suit, and people kind of, hey, I'm some trouble with my passport. Yeah, I'll take that. I'll take care of that for you.
Everybody wants.
That's my dream. I know it's shallow and indulgent and all that, but that's it. Having said that, if there is another way I can contribute that maybe is a little more burdensome, I mean, I'll take one for the team if I have to.
Well, if there's anybody I want from the neighborhood and politics lounging around in Casablanca, it's you, my friend.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, I'm just, these are my Bogart fantasies. I mean,
all right. I'll record an ending.
We're all dreamers.
I'll record an ending to this after I let you go. Tom Kenniff, thank you so much. All right, guys, that's today's episode of the Tom Kelly Show. Normally, the show is not nearly so serious. Normally, this is about me being a little bit of a goofball, talking comedy and, silly things going on in my life. The gimmick of the podcast is one stand-up comedian gets back to having fun. So if you're new to the show and you came in just for the Kenniff interview and talking politics, hit subscribe anyway. I'd love to have you on board. I kind of got a little more serious with the podcast this week because, honestly, the cool thing about having a podcast is when you have, it's an excuse to invite someone smart on to talk about something smart. And, I think Tom Kenniff is a good guy. I think he's smart. And you know what? He actually made me a little smarter with the interview, and I hope you did you as well. If you want to support my career, listen, comment on the YouTube, comment on my social media stuff. That's all Tom Kelly Show. I'm on the road in Las Vegas and in Maine over the next couple of weeks, so no need for you to worry about me, but there'll be new podcast episodes every Monday and Wednesday. And listen, if you're this far into the show, I'm grateful for you. All right. Magic Mirror, I see Diana in Canada. I hope you're doing well. And until next time, good night, New York.